this month, the National Statistics Bureau has published a set of data which said in the half year, the Chinese economic growth is 7.6%, and in the first quarter it is 7.7%, while the second quarter is 7.5%. So what's your view? Do you think this rate is it too low? And what kind of measures do you suggest the Chinese government to take to improve our economy growth?
Well, it depends what the dynamic is. If the growth rate stays at 7.5%, I think that's not a big problem, because the average growth rate of China since 1978 is 9.9%. To have above 10% for the last 10 years was exceptionally fast. If China had 2 years growth at 7.5%, I don't think it's a big problem. Right. The problem is the downward dynamic. Right. That is the dangerous thing, because if it falls below that, below 7.5%, well, at 7.5%, the quality of growth is beginning to get worse, but not seriously worse. Let me explain to you why the quality of growth is getting worse, because there is a formula being used in China at the moment that growth is slower, but the quality is improving. This is not true. The growth is slower and the quality is worse. Why? Firstly, because the rate of increase of the population's income is slowing down. Now, in my opinion, the key criteria for measuring quality of growth should be how fast is the population's income increasing. A market economy can only be profit-led growth. There is only one thing that causes more to be produced in a market economy, that is if profit goes up, and the thing which causes less to be produced is profit goes down. So there is nothing if you think it's caused by consumption, you mean you don't know what the market economy is. Right, okay. At the moment, therefore, what is happening is the percentage of consumption in GDP has been raised. This means wages are rising more rapidly than GDP. So GDP has been growing at about 10% a year, but many places have been putting through increases in the minimum wage, for example, in many provinces, 22%. And this is causing a profits crisis in the companies, right? This is the reason for example, the liquidity crisis in the early part of the year. The companies are under their profit pressure, they're not investing, or the rate of growth for investment is falling. Therefore, the economy is growing slowly. So that's what created the crisis in June, because then they're desperate for cash, right? Yeah. Right. Second problem, wrong idea, is this totally wrong slogan of small government, big market. Right. This is not going to happen. As China urbanizes, government expenditure is going to increase as a percentage of GDP. Let me show you that very simply. The United States, the official ideology of the United States is they're against big government. Everybody said the president's against big government, the Senate's against big government, the companies are against big government. But if you look at the data, the percentage of government expenditure in US GDP has risen from 7.5% to 28% of GDP. So everybody says they're in favour of small government, but actually the government gets bigger and bigger. Right. Why? Because urbanisation requires enormous government expenditure. It requires transport system, power supply, sewerage system, housing. Right. Secondly, the urban population requires many forms of social security, which the rural population doesn't require. Or no, it does require them, but it has less need. If you're a peasant and you're a bit poor, you can grow your own food, but you can't if you live in a town. Therefore, this means that expenditure on health, expenditure on social security, etc., tends to go up. So therefore, as China urbanizes, the percentage of government expenditure in the economy is going to get bigger, not smaller. Right. Therefore, this is why we have a strategy, urbanisation, which is entirely correct. I could go into why, but I totally agree with the strategy of urbanisation. But there is no financial plan for it. Why? Because I know that there was a financial plan that was drawn up, which was then rejected. Because as soon as you do the sums, you will find out that the share of government expenditure in GDP will increase. As that, somebody did the sums, somebody didn't like the result because they find out that the share of government expenditure will increase, but you won't be able to do the sums to make any difference because the government expenditures in urbanisation are so big that that's going to go up. So therefore at the moment you can't have a strategy urbanisation without financial numbers to it. So therefore the problem is therefore you have some wrong theories which are creating problems. Now what I believe, as I've been writing about China's economy for more than 20 years, is that this is not the first time China has encountered problems. You know, in general I'm a great supporter of China's economy, but this doesn't mean that everything goes well all the time, obviously, right? So therefore I know as a good thing, for the first 6 months of the year, people were trying to write saying there should be no stimulus, there should be no stimulus, there should be no stimulus, right? The economy slowed down too much, so I know yesterday there was a stimulus, right? Okay, as I said, I haven't yet had a chance to look at how big, but already this policy begins to change a bit. So I hope that what will happen is, as people find out that these theories which are being put forward won't work, therefore I hope that there will be a change in practical policy. So I think therefore there's going to be some discussion about what to do. So therefore there are those problems which cannot be overcome quickly because they're due to accumulation of investment and so on. And then there are those problems which can be overcome quickly because they're caused by wrong ideas. And I think the ones caused by wrong ideas can be dealt with quickly. So dealing with them is the most urgent.
We noticed that you're very active in Chinese micro blog. So we see there are lots of debates in your website. Some people may support you while some others may oppose your idea. So what's your view towards their response?
Don't care. If abuse is the criteria, I mean, you know,
not that serious.
To liberate China, millions of people died. Right, I mean, to fight the Japanese, to create the People's Republic of China, millions of people died. Who should care if somebody insulted, or Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison in order to liberate South Africa. Somebody should be worried because you're insulted on Weibo. It's a joke, right? It's of no consequence, right? The only matter which is serious is the facts to be correct, right? The general thing that I always run my career on is the following. In my opinion, 80% of what is believed is true, but 20% is not, right, in the mass media. Therefore, all that I'm doing in Weibo is bringing facts. Right. Now, I know that some people get very angry because I bring facts. It's strange. They don't get angry because I'm British or something like that. They get angry because I bring facts. Right. Why? Because the facts show that what they're saying is not true. Right. It's the same with the United States with Snowden. Right. I mean, I'm not comparing. Snowden's a much more heroic individual than I am. Right. Snowden is, all I'm doing is writing Weibo. I mean, I've got a nice job in China, I visit China, I get, nice meals, and I like being in China, right? Okay. Snowden is risking life imprisonment. So I'm not comparing, he's very much more important than I am, right? Why is the United States scared of him? They're scared of him because he tells the truth.
Yeah.
They're not scared of terrorists. They're scared of people who tell the truth. Right, because they try to conceal the truth. Right, they try to pretend they're in favour of democracy. Right, well, look at Egypt. Right, they support a military coup in Egypt. Right, the first elected government. They support the Saudi Arabian dictatorship. Let's not go through the ridiculous thing of calling it a monarchy. It's a dictatorship. Yeah. Right, the Saudi Arabian dictatorship, the Qatari dictatorship, the Bahraini dictatorship, the Israeli regime which specialises in ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, right? And they pretend that they support democracy. This is just stupid, right? Therefore, the people, what they're scared of is people who tell the truth, right? That's why they don't like Assange, because he told the truth. They don't like Snowden, because he told the truth. And also, therefore, the neoliberals, the people on Weibo, what they're scared in China is they're scared of the truth, right? That's why they insult me. Not just because I give simple facts, but these simple facts destroy their
intention.
And destroy their intention, yes, right, okay. So why should I, it's stupid. I mean, all they do is they insult me. First, I don't respect them, so I don't care whether they insult me or not, right? I only care, and anyway, I'm not I'm not a great heroic person. I'm not, like being in the PLA or something, but I'm not so cowardly that I'm worried because somebody attacks me on, Weibo. I don't have to give my life in order to liberate the country. All I have to do is write Weibo, that's all. So of course I don't care whether they insult me or not.
Just several days ago, Japan has become the 12th member of the group of TTP. So what do you think? What kind of influence it may have to China in terms of Japan's decision?
I don't think it'll have big influence. Because I think that what they're trying to create is a group of slowly growing economies centred on the United States. The United States trade is rising very slowly. Japan's trade is falling. Therefore, I don't think it have confidence. The TPP is a political initiative of the United States designed to get a series of Asian countries to oppose China. Politically, it's very important, but I don't think economically it will have big consequences. Also, I don't think it's going to even be very easy for Japan to go along with it, because Japan is very, very protectionist country, particularly in agriculture. American agriculture wants to get into Japan, but the small Japanese farmers cannot compete with American agriculture, which is the most efficient and the most subsidized in the world. If the Japanese agricultural sector were opened up to free trade, the Japanese farmers would be destroyed. And the Japanese farmers are the electoral base of the LDP, and the small shops as well, because the American supermarkets would go into Japan and completely destroy the small shops. But that's the electoral base of the LDP. So I think Abe is going along with this for political reasons, but I don't think he will make the economic concessions. Or if he does, then this will have a very negative effect on the LDP's base. Secondly, Abenomics has very contradictory effects, because it's very bad for firstly for some American companies. The Ford Motor Company, for example, has already attacked the devaluation of the yen very strongly, because it knows what will happen. It means that there will be big increase in export of Japanese cars to the United States. So the Ford Motor Company says the American motor industry just come out of a great big crisis, and America accepting the lower exchange rate of the yen will cause big problems for American manufacturers. It will have very negative consequences on South Korea, because South Korean exports compete with Japanese exports. So although Abe has been relatively hostile, well, not relatively, very hostile to China, the South Korean president came here and was very nice and very friendly and so forth. Why? Because she thinks South Korea is going to face problems with Japan, and she wants to have lots of exports to China. So therefore, the intentions of the TPP are very bad, in the sense that they're aimed to weaken China. My actual view is that it won't make very much difference in practice, because there are too many contradictions in the situation.
Thank you. We know several days ago the city of Detroit has officially announced their bankruptcy. So what do you think? Their economy, do you think US economy actually is recovering now?
Yeah, it's recovering slowly. I would expect the growth rate of the US GDP to be about 2%. So I don't expect a new big crisis, a big downfall in the US economy. But I expect very slow growth, 2%. That has the consequences. Some people say, one big debate in China is not really in China, big debate in the world is when will China overtake the United States to become the largest economy in the world? Well, they say that China's economy is slowing down, so the US will maintain its advantage for longer. No, sorry. The calculations done by the International Monetary Fund are for when China will overtake the US GDP to become the largest economy in the world, which is 2017, 2018, are done on the assumption that China's economy grows at 7.8% a year and the US GDP grows at 3% a year. Well, China may not grow at 7.8% a year, but the US is not going to grow at 3% a year. So what it really assumes is that China's growth rate is 4.8% higher than the United States. But at the moment, China's growth rate is 5.5% faster than the United States. Yeah, so I would expect China's economy to continue to grow about between 7 and 8%. And I would expect the US economy to continue to grow at about 2%. So there is recovery, but not very fast. I think Detroit is a bit specific, and you should not make a comparison to China, really, because China is a unified monetary system. The resources are just simply transferred between different parts of the national economy, but the central government sustains the financial system of the local municipalities. We also know that in China it sustains the banking system. In America is different, it's a separate system. So Detroit is a very unpleasant thing in the United States, but I don't think it's going to be a new, big, huge crisis in the United States.
Our last question for you is, although the US economy is recovering now, but what kind of problems do you think they still have to face with in the future?
Okay. Well, the fundamental one is that the creation of capital is much too low. The savings rate in the United States, and savings is just capital, is almost nil once you take into account consumption of capital. Because you understand an economy consumes capital each year. Factories wear out, transport equipment wears out, etc. So about 12% of GDP is consumption of capital each year. Well, for the last 2 to 3 years, creation of capital in the United States has been less than the consumption of capital. It's a very strange situation, but the world's #1 capitalist country was not producing any capital. It was only borrowing money from abroad. The last time this happened was in 1929 to 1932, not by accident, of course, right, okay? Now, it's true that in the last year, the creation of capital is slightly higher than the consumption of capital. That's why I believe that there will continue to be some continued recovery in the US, but it's very low. It's 1% of GDP, 2% of GDP. So the US is just not creating, and you have to have savings in order to have investment. It's just, you can't have investment if you don't have savings to finance it. The level of investment is so low in the US economy that it's impossible for it to grow quickly. And I know I've been having this argument with people in China for about the last 2 to 3 years, with Chinese economists. I'd say your figures for the growth, projected figures for the growth of the US economy are too fast. And they would say, no, but we've read it in a congressional report. I say, I don't care what you read in the Congress. The congressional report is partly politics. It's to make the president saying the population is going to feel good, etc., etc. I say, it's not interesting, really, what's in the congressional report. Go away and look at the data. And the data shows that this economy can only grow very slowly. The fact that it is now creating investment, a small amount, after 2 to 3 years, is why I don't believe that there will be a new crisis. That's why I believe that Detroit is not a symptom of a great big new crisis in the US economy, right? Now, it may be a symptom of a big coming attack on the population of the United States living standards. Because if they cut the pensions and so on in Detroit, because you understand the proposal is the city should go bankrupt so that they don't have to pay the pensions of the employees of the city. Well, it can be a big new attack on the living standards of the US population, but I don't think it indicates a big new economic crisis inside the United States. So I think there will be some recovery, but this recovery will become slow. The only way that the United States could have very fast recovery would be to greatly increase the level of investment. But the only way that it can increase the level of investment is either to borrow a great deal of money from abroad, which I don't think will happen because it used to borrow this money from China. But China's trade surplus now is not very big, so therefore it can't borrow the money from China. Or by greatly reducing the living standards of the American population. Now, Detroit does indicate that. There is going to be a new attack on the population's living standards. I would therefore expect some political instability inside the United States as the attempt to reduce the living standards is made. But this would have to be quite big. So therefore I don't believe the US economy is going to grow fast. It's just going to continue to grow about 2% a year.
So actually in the example of Detroit, the real victim are the ordinary people.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Because the
pension are cut off.
Right, there's one of three groups of people. Right, the three people, somebody is going to lose. Right. The groups of people who could lead are the bondholders. That's the people who lent the money to Detroit. They are the city employees who can have, and city services, which could be reduced. And they're the pensioners of the city. Right. The proposal to have bankruptcy is fundamentally to reduce the pensions. That means, therefore, because you understand, as Detroit's a city which exists for 100 years, there are very, very many people who are taking pensions from Detroit, right? Legally, it may be unconstitutional to reduce the pensions. There is a legal challenge to the bankruptcy of Detroit on the grounds it's unconstitutional, because they say that these people have saved for their pensions all their lives. Many of them would have worked for 40 or 45 years for Detroit. Therefore, they are constitutionally entitled to have their pensions. Right. The bankruptcy will allow you to reduce the pensions, and there is a legal battle going on at this very moment about whether they can constitutionally reduce the pensions. But let's assume, as in my opinion, the Constitution of the United States is normally bent in order to carry out the interests of certain groups in the government. I assume that it will be ruled that the reduction of the pensions is constitutional, right? Well, in that case, that means that the pensioners, the living standards of the workers in Detroit, but in particular the living standard of the pensioners of Detroit, will be very greatly reduced. That's what the Detroit crisis is about. I don't think it's a new crisis of growth in the US. It's a new crisis of attack on the living standards. In this case, it's particularly pensioners. There's already been a big attack on living standards of people in work, because median wages in the United States haven't gone up for 20 years. This is a new attack, which is a big attack on Social Security. Of course, later, everybody knows that there's going to be an attempt to attack the basic US Social Security system, that is the pension system, in the country as a whole. Well, but that's a very big and explosive question, right? You can win or lose a presidential election over that type of question. So therefore you have, this is first being tried out to Detroit to see what the consequences will be, to see if this can be done later across the United States as a whole. So that's the real lessons of Detroit.
So actually the bankruptcy could be considered as a trick by those politicians.
Yes, it's not a trick, it's an attempt. If the city is not bankrupt, legally they cannot reduce the pensions, right? If the city is made bankrupt, legally, well, they say that they can legally reduce the pensions. Okay, lawyers are in court actually, literally at the moment as we speak, saying that no, you can't, even if the city is bankrupt, according to the Constitution of the United States, you can't reduce the pensions, but there will be a legal battle. Because of, my opinion, is as I told you, the US Constitution is used to, means whatever powerful groups want it to mean, right? So I assume it will be, the pensions will be reduced. That's what my assumption about, but that's what it's really about.